Hello everyone, welcome to our channel CareersTalk. Friends, today's Scrum Master interview questions were shared by a member of our WhatsApp group who recently received 3 offers from companies like CGI, Wipro and Deloitte. And today we are going to discuss Deloitte first round Scrum Master interview. Friends, my name is Sunil Sharma. I'm an Agile consultant based in Netherlands. And on this channel, we invite industry experts to share their valuable experience and insight with all of us. So before we start, if you're new to our channel, please make sure to hit like, subscribe, and join our CareersTalk family. At the end of the session, please give us a big like and leave a comment to let us know what you thought about this session. Your support means a lot to us and it helps us to keep bringing you valuable content. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's welcome Hani Kumar she's having 14 years of total IT experience. And from last 6 years, she is working as a Scrum Master. So hello, Hani, and welcome, and thank you for giving your time today. Hani, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunan. This is the second time I'm coming to Career Talks, and it's always a pleasure being here.
Thank you, Hani. So if you allow, shall we start?
Yes, yes, we can start.
Okay, so the very first question is, you have mentioned working in a major transformation project. So can you please explain one of them and challenges you face? So this question is asked to someone else, not to Hani, but then the way, I got it, so I just ask you straight away. Hani, over to you.
Okay, yeah. So recently I was working on a legacy application, and the client wanted us to move or update it for a better performance. So one of the major issues that I faced there was a resistance to change. Employees who were basically working for decades and probably the system was there for decades were very resistant to basically adapting to new technology. They were very concerned about the new system, and they were not sure about the unknowns. Uh, so that is where there was a lot of resistance um to change, and then we had to basically come up with a solution. We basically organized multiple KT sessions, multiple training sessions, and multiple the tech leads had to come in place, and they basically added as a change champions, and the transition went smooth. So this is one of the major challenges that was faced in the team. And during those challenges, the major issue that happens is when we move from one infrastructure to the other infrastructure, there is a very high possibility that we might lose some of the data. So a cleanup of the data is required, or basically the data needs to be much more formulated. So inconsistent, incomplete data should be refined. So these are the few challenges that I faced with these projects.
Okay, wonderful. So I think it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I can add a lot of things, but I think by looking at the time, so I'll share you quickly. So we are working for a similar sort of project. Like we have to migrate from a monolithic platform to a headless microservices architecture. Again, because we want to enable the faster release and the personalized customer experience. So the business was losing market share due to all the slow feature releases and again the rigid legacy platform. So then the leadership decided to adapt agile delivery with the cross-functional squads and they break the monolith into microservices. But the teams were used to work in silos, so front end, back end, queue, and things like that. And there is no Scrum framework in place. So as a coach, our goal was to establish Scrum practices across all three newly formed squads and coach team members on agile mindset, the way of working. We have to ensure the business continuity during the migration. So each squad was responsible for a business critical domain. So we have a product catalog, checkout, and payments, things like that. So we started with agile readiness assessment just to understand the gaps in the skills and in the mindset as a baseline. And then we again we facilitated a lot of team formation workshops to align the roles and the responsibilities under the Scrum way of working. We introduce all these definition of done sprint goals to build a shared understanding of the quality and the delivery target. And of course, we coach the product owners on writing user stories with invest criteria, all this prioritization technique like weighted shortage of first and things like that. We also work with DevOps to integrate CI/CD pipeline into the workflow and reduce the manual deployment bottlenecks. So there are many challenges. Many developers were not familiar with test-driven development. They don't trust short iteration cycles and things like that. All the businesses expect some quick wins, and there are like steep technical learning curve which is there. So it will take some time to people to catch up with all these things. There are some backend services which were still tightly coupled to the monolith, so that causing a lot of integration challenges and a lot of blockers. All to address all these kind of things, we facilitate spikes and technical grooming with architects to break down the stories more better, just so that the risk is reduced. So we also started something called Scrum Clinic and one-on-one coaching to help the team members to the transition from the way they are thinking from a project to a product-oriented delivery. So from a project to product, that's what something which we thought about it. So yeah, I think it takes 16 to 20 different sprints, to be very honest, so that team can achieve that stable velocity. It's a 3 to 4 years, I think, 3 years project. And so something which we have created. A lot of things happen. Checkout time for the team is reduced. Across like different collaboration happen, cross team things are happening and things like that. So we ultimately try to, we can say, yeah, we are able to do that successful transformation because we are able to create that model for for agile scaling and things like that. So that's something I just want to quickly wrap up, and I hope it makes sense, honey. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
great. Let's move on quickly to the second question. And now I'm not going to take much time. You're just going to continue. So the second question is, how do you transform your Scrum project into the scale agile using a Scrum setup? I think this is pretty much in
Okay.
line with the first one, but please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, scaling agile is basically moving from Scrum to a Scrum of Scrum setup, which you already mentioned. It is basically the coordination and collaboration between multiple Scrum teams, uh, working on probably the same product or the same project. So it is very important to establish a very clear vision and the product goal along with the entire team. It is across all the teams. There should be a proper roadmap created for all the teams, and without this alignment it would be very difficult, and there will be a lot of ambiguity and a lot of duplicated effort. So it is very important that we have the program level goals basically structured somewhere, and should be aligning with all the teams. It is very important next side is to basically identify the team structure. What is the team structure for each of the teams that we require, and what is the requirements for each of the team to fulfill that, probably a CFI or cross-functional initiative. Uh, so it is very important that we have a cross-functional initiative consisting of the developers, the testers, the product owners, many teams, many product owners, designers. This will avoid the bottlenecks and dependencies between the teams. Um, it is also very important to basically create a risk management chart or the risk assessment chart where we can add all the risk that is identified and basically uh, documented somewhere, and have a mitigation plan which is basically structured beforehand. We should also be able to identify and manage the dependency in the earlier stage. In the earlier stage, identifying these dependencies would be crucial because these dependencies will avoid a lot of bottlenecks also, and these dependencies and the risk should be very transparent to the entire product team as well as all the stakeholders, so that if there is a solution that needs to be provided, and if there is an inter-team dependencies, then it can be resolved very promptly. Also, we can, if it is on the enterprise level, we can have an RT in place who can basically facilitate the release planning and ensure the smooth delivery of the entire product. We can also introduce a few other scaling ceremonies, which are nothing but uh, retrospective with the team, or reviews with the team, or even the sprint planning with all the teams that are involved here. Um, Here, it is very important to be very transparent, to talk about the dependencies that we have and talk about the issues that we might face in future. So it is very important that way. Also, an end-to-end testing should be put in place for the entire enterprise level product or a scaled product that is there, so that we can test completely if everything has been working fine.
Wonderful, Honey. So very small thing I just want to add. So you have already covered a lot of things. The only thing is the structure of SOS meeting should be should have a clear focus. So for example, like, okay, what did we completed that affect the other teams? Because here we are talking about different teams. Okay, what will we do next that might impact others? So then the people will have already know that well in advance that okay, it's going to be there. And of course, as you mentioned, the risk. So what blockers or risk do we see that need cross team attention? So that's
Yeah.
something we should focus on. And of course, as you mentioned, we should have a shared dependency board. It can be on a Jira, you can use advanced roadmap. The thing is you have to visualize the timeline and the ownership and the blockers. So that's very important. And as you also mentioned, we can have, let's say, RTs to run the cross team planning. So of course we have PI planning and things like that. We can also have some weekly integration demos to ensure that we are not waiting until the end of the quarter to discover the problem. And you also highlight the retrospective of retrospective, basically. So we can also facilitate retrospective every month to inspect and adapt at a scale level that, okay, what we are doing and what we are not doing. So I think, yeah, I think you have wonderfully covered all the points. Great, Honey, thank you. Let's move on. So the next question is, how do you perform estimation for your team? Or I would say, how you help your team to perform a better estimation?
Okay, so estimations on the feature at the epic level is different, and estimations on the user stories level is different. There are multiple ways to do the estimations. We can use the Fibonacci series, which is most popular with the user stories, but we can also do the t-shirt sizing, which is important and good for the early stage discussions. For an example, we get the epics or the features ready at the time, as in at the time of the PI planning, or probably at the start of the quarter. We can estimate it in terms of the t-shirt sizing, give the amount of say sprints that piece of work might take to complete. So if excess is somewhere between 0 to 1 sprints, we can estimate in that way. The other one, which is uh, point estimations. Basically, this is basically a better way of estimations where we can have the user stories estimated on the basis of complexity, the efforts, the uncertainty involved. We should be identifying if there are any unknown or if there's what is the amount of effort that is required in that piece of work, what is the complexity of the work. It doesn't mean that it is the number of hours that has been put in for that particular piece of work. So it is very important that we have all these three factors basically identified for the story point estimation, and we can basically pick up the Fibonacci series or the linear series as well. Most popularly used is the Fibonacci series, where we can estimate the user stories.
Okay, great. Wonderful, Honey. Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. So what are the different activities which you carry as a Scrum Master during the sprint planning sessions?
Okay, yeah. So very important activity. Usually we maintain a backlog health of at least 2 to 3 sprints, which is our practice, which we should be doing as a practice by the Scrum Master. But sometimes it is not possible. So it is important that we review the product backlog. We basically identify what are the highest priority of items that are available. If the sprint backlog worth of 2 sprints or 3 sprints are not identified. So basically, we will be discussing the backlog items that are available. Uh, we make sure during the backlog refinement call, all of these items are refined. These are basically added, estimated, and basically prioritized. During the backlog refinement, we do have one level of discussions, but during the sprint planning also we have one level of discussions. We basically identify, based on these priority, we identify the work that can be picked up, and basically product owner basically explains these these user stories once more, and we can basically discuss what is our questions. Uh, we pick based on the previous sprint's velocity, like we can take the average of the few last sprints velocity. We basically identified what is the estimated velocity that we have, and we basically add it as a part of the sprint backlog. Before the sprint backlog, we do the capacity allocation, where we identify the leaves of the uh, developers that is there, and identify how much is the effort in the capacity available for each of the individual. So based on that, we basically identify how much can be put up in this current sprint, plan the work and identify the sprint goal, and then basically discuss any of the potential blockers or external dependencies that they have. We basically have the sprint backlog ready. We discuss it with the product owner, agree on the sprint backlog, and ensure that the sprint goal is added.
Okay, so you mentioned the capacity planning, right? So how you do that? Like, can you explain how you do the capacity planning?
Okay, so if basically if there is, it is basically the effort that the team has for the current sprint, and it basically helps to predict the amount of work that can be picked up in the current sprint or the future sprint. For an example, if there is one person available for 10 who is working for 6 hours in a day, productively working for 6 hours in a day, and there are 10 days in the sprint, so the amount of capacity that is available with that person is 60 hours of effort that is remaining with him. So that is where we calculate the capacity accordingly.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. So, what is velocity in Agile? And do you think that this is something for team, or this is for something for managers? What is the significance of having a velocity in the team?
Yeah. Okay, so velocity is nothing but summing up the amount of story points that we have delivered in these sprints. It's basically historical measurements. If the team completes, say, 30 story points in sprint one, and say 27 story points, or say 25 story points in sprint two, the average is going to be somewhere between the average is going to be somewhere between 29 story points. If 30 story points in one sprint and 28 story points in second sprint, their average velocity will be 29 sprints. Based on that completed work, we basically identify and forecast how much of work we can take it in the future sprints. So basically, it helps us to identify the past metrics. It is based on the work in the previous sprints.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll just close my video because I think there is some problem from my end. So I think it's a network problem. So I just close the video. Okay, so let's go ahead. So let's say you're one of your, let's say a new team member, or let's say fresher join your team. So how are you going to explain the story point estimation to him or her?
So basically, from the standpoint of developers, when they join the team, and they basically measure the efforts put in for that piece of work. They measure the amount of time that is invested in that work uh, based on the efforts. Like 12 hours, if this piece of work is going to take 12 hours, that we need to unlearn and make them relearn that it is not basically just on the efforts that we assign the story points, right? So we have to measure the complexity, the risk, and the efforts together to identify the story points for each of the individual user stories that they take. So basically, it is not how long will you take to finish that work, but it is how hard or how difficult that piece of work is to basically take in. So that is how basically we explain it to a fresher who comes in, and it is not this story points is not from that fresher standpoint. We'll have to make sure that we give that, oh no, if the 3 points, you need to finish it in this many days only. No, we have to basically see how much he can deliver, and then normalize that velocity for each of the individual that is there. So our focus is not on identifying the efforts that is being put in, but basically identifying on a whole how much of uh, what is the say say sorry, what is the complexity and what is the uncertainty also involved in that this particular piece of work.
Correct. So all three things are important. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to our next question, Honey. So the next question is, suppose you join a new team, and then you discover that the product owner is, is too much rigid, and then the POs dictate the specific functionality, and he is telling your team to, complete it, this particular thing by end of the day. And when you checked with the team, you find out that even the product backlog is not being maintained properly. Things are coming randomly and things like that. So how you are going to manage, or how you are going to handle such a team? How you are going to work with your product owner, with your team, to improve the overall performance of your team and the team morale? Honey?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so very first thing that I would want to understand, if he has come up and he says that there is a new requirement that needs to be delivered, we'll have to understand the urgency of that work. We'll have to understand why the PO is behaving that way. And basically, we have to discuss if it is an urgent work and how is it impacting the revenue. If it is impacting the revenue, something needs to be moved out of the sprint and that needs to be injected. Very first thing. But that is not just not the it should not become a practice always, right? So we'll have to explain it to the product owner, saying that basically we'll have to maintain that product backlog. We'll have to maintain at least product backlog or the sprint backlog for another 2 3 sprints, which I already mentioned before. He has to come up and populate basically the known work and the upcoming needs from the stakeholders, from the customers, or from the stakeholders on the product. We have to start with the backlog refinement sessions with the PO regularly. In the start, you can have 2 backlog refinement sessions per week till we have a stable product backlog. We should ask the product owner to basically prioritize the items, giving more visibility to the team. It is something we'll have to educate the product owner and ensure that he basically starts following the agile principles. It also should not be like that he comes to us and says that, oh no, I want this by the end of the day. But in that case, we'll have to always tell him that if it is urgent, we can swap some other work and basically pick this up. But that should not become a regular practice. We should basically start coaching during workshops. If there is a workshop needed for him to understand on the scrum roles or probably his responsibilities, we can just discuss on it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Honey. Let's move on. So let's say 2 or 3 days have passed in your current sprint, and you were promised an external dependency. So for example, let's say from a microservices team to your front-end team, there is something which they are supposed to be delivered before the third day of the sprint. But the other team inform you that they cannot deliver due to some valid reasons. So now how we are going to manage this situation?
Okay. So if there is an external dependency from the microservice team and if it is delayed, the very first thing that I would be doing is communicate immediately. Notify the stakeholders, which are basically the product owners or any of the external customers that are there. We basically communicate them, let them know the dependency is delayed and the release timings can also be delayed. Right? This is the very first thing, and that can be a risk that can be added as a part of the Jira ticket or probably sent in through mail or anything. But we need to reassess the sprint scope as well. We have to understand from the third party team, understanding if there is a short term fix that they can put up. For an example, if it is the API that they are going to develop, probably the mock API, if they can give up in the initial phases so that we can start working on it, right? If they are not able to basically give up this, we need to basically let them know the new delivery date upon speaking to the tech leads of both the teams. And basically, we need to collaborate with the product owner to basically review the sprint backlog and probably take the items which are ready for picking up right now, but uh, the focus should shift from the block to work to the unblocked work. So basically, we should start prioritizing the unblocked work and pull any work that is basically can be picked up. So yes, we should very first thing we should be on the very first communicate and reassess immediately. And
Correct.
yeah,
Correct. Absolutely. Okay, so if I have to summarize, we have to assess the impact immediately so we can gather as much as information as possible. So what exactly is delayed? What is the impact on the stories in this sprint? And is there any possible workaround or let's say stuff which we can use temporarily, which you also mentioned, right? So in one of the project, the backend team uh, could not able to deliver, the endpoint on time. So my team used Postman mocks and JSON schema to continue developing the UI
mm,
until the real API was ready. So that's something which I can just, recall quickly. And of course, as you mentioned, we have to communicate transparently in our daily scrum. So we'll have to make sure that the
yeah,
team discuss the impact during the next daily scrum. We should also encourage them to raise it as an impediment openly and add it in our scrum board blocker or whatever we use it. And we can work outside the scrum to coordinate with the microservices team. We can understand their timelines and then we can push it for at least a stub or a temporary access, right? So our role here is to shield the team from negotiation
yeah,
and focus on unblocking them as quickly as possible. And of course, we should also adapt our sprint plan so we can have quick replanning session, maybe like 20-30 minute session. So can we, and we can
yeah,
ask like, okay, can we swap backlog items that not depend on a blocked API, or can we split the story and deliver the part of the functionality this sprint? So we can also work with the product owner to realign on the sprint goal feasibility. So things like that. And of course, as you mentioned, we should escalate only if needed. With solution in hand, that's very important. So if the delay threaten a critical milestone or some regulatory deadlines or things like that, then I think we should escalate through proper channel, but with solution, not the complaints only, right? So we
yeah,
must also raise this in our scrum of scrum or whatever the release train, or of course to the RTs or whatever the sync up meetings which we are happening. And in the last, of course, we all should collect together and do the retrospective. So we should make sure that okay, why was the dependency times was misaligned or not able to match, and can we improve? How we can
yeah,
improve the cross team planning, or maybe we can add some dependency flags or something like that, or can we have interface contracts earlier or something like that, right? So all these things I think
yeah,
are doable. Few of the things which could do as a Scrum Masters. So yes, I think with
yeah.
this we are came to end of this session, Ani. So thank you one more time, thank you for joining us. I know there are a lot of things going on at a personal and professional life, but still you take time to come out and do this session. So thank you. And thank you, friends, for joining us to this session. We hope you found it helpful and informative. And if you enjoyed this session, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in our next session. Until then, take care. This is Manoj Sharma signing off along with Hani. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Hani.
Bye bye. Bye bye.